So we're trying something different, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm Paul, by the way.
I'm Jesse. Trying to
Okay. We're
figure
doing a
out.
test run of the podcast, but with cameras. So that's exciting. And it's just been a week. It's been a month. It's been a very interesting month.
It's been, yeah, it's been a year.
It's been a very interesting year. It's been a roller coaster for most people. And it shouldn't be, but it is. So,
Well, we're 6 months into 2021, and it's almost the end of January. So,
right. Yeah. We don't know when the reset button is really going to be hit
mm,
with life. But TFCon will be in October in Baltimore. So hopefully we'll be able to see people again.
yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I think it's just far enough away that I'll probably just get a hotel room up there.
Mm-hmm.
But assuming that it actually happens, then I'll definitely be going.
Well, I think the table fee that I paid for Chicago carries over. So,
That'll
you
be
know,
good.
yeah, I'll likely be there too. Um, yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about craziness. Uh,
There's not much to talk about. I mean,
we
craziness
talked
just
last
in
time.
general or as it relates to the hobbies and everything?
Um, maybe we'll just stick to the hobbies.
Well, I have not been posting nearly as much, um,
Yeah.
just because so much of Robots with Coffee is kind of drawn from things that happen in life, and nothing's happening. So I just haven't always had the motivation to post anything. And I do have a couple of bits lined up for this week, so hopefully I'll have something tomorrow, and hopefully have something for the rest of the week. Lord knows that I've amassed enough robots
hmm
in the past month to keep me busy.
And so for those who follow along, you do our photo comics, and a lot of them are very story based. When you do them, there's generally like 4 to 5 strips that are take place in the cafe with essential cast of characters. Do you ever think that's like hard to do? That because sometimes when you do something like that, you don't really need like a complete and total punchline. There's um, the robots themselves are kind of like the gags, and just them appearing is a gag.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll start off with something and not know where it's going to go. And sometimes I'll start off with a single strip and it'll turn into 5 because
Right.
just keep moving along.
Um,
And,
yeah.
I don't often plan anything out. It's usually I wake up in the morning and think, oh, that might be funny, and
hmm
run downstairs and do the strip. Um, and obviously, it's all very by the seat of your pants. I do everything on my phone.
Yeah.
I've got like 2 or 3 photo apps that I use to do just some editing to the photos and to add the word bubbles and effects. And so this isn't like, I'm not sitting and like scripting anything for the most part, or thinking ahead. It's very spur of the moment.
Yeah.
And I've been surprised looking back. I mean, there was a time for a while when I was still doing not the photo comics, but just doing the posts for Robots with Coffee, where I was doing 2 of those a day for a good solid 2 years. And then
Yeah.
with the strips, I was doing 1 a day
hmm
for a long time. And I've kind of fallen off on that, but just the sheer volume of media that I've created for this kind of is kind of overwhelming.
Well, it's good to have. It's it's an outlet, right? It keeps us
Yeah,
off the streets.
yeah. Gives me
From
to buy
our
toys.
from our street gang, the Paul and Jesse street gang. our biker gang.
You know, it gives me a reason to spend money on things that it's like, oh, that's expensive. I don't want to buy this. It's like, but I can think of a strip for this, so I have to
See,
get it.
if there were income from this, you could do that as a tax write-off.
Yeah, you know, I was actually talking to my wife about that the other day.
I need Paul to put me on payroll so I can take this. I need Paul to put me on payroll for this thing that barely breaks even
Yeah.
as far as hosting and printing goes.
So, are you going to be doing some drawing?
I could. I don't have any requests. I thought maybe I might do some show and tell or something, unless you don't have anything.
No, go ahead.
Um, this is my favorite figure of the year. Is it showing up vertically or horizontally?
It's your phone is in like picture mode
Way to
or
go, Paul.
yeah.
There you go. It's in a portrait and not landscape, the one that we're looking at. So that screws everything up. But this is Smoke Screen, and he's my favorite character. You know, he's my favorite of them, the ones that I picked up. And then our friend Pete Chavez sent me this guy. I think he's the greatest. He's ridiculous. I don't know. I don't know if he's. I don't know how he's finding them, if they're already out in retail or not. This is Machine Wars Optimus Prime, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But you know what he looks like? He looks like Thunder Clash. Later, and I didn't say I want to get my hopes up and think, oops, I got Thunder Clash by mistake somewhere, or someone was selling them cheap or whatever. But I think they just reused the mold. I don't know if this is the first bootleg figure I ever got, but this is like a top spin or twin twist. I can't remember which is which.
Top spin.
He's much larger than the other ones. Top spin. And there you go. As far as figures are concerned, plus you sent me these four guys.
Yeah.
Set, and so thank you for that.
I ended up with two of those. I had pre-ordered it and forgot, and which I've been doing that more often lately. So I wanted to pass that along. I ordered the knockoff MP44 Optimus Prime from the Show Z store like months ago and forgot. And one day I get this big package and it's like, what is this? What is in here? And I open it up and it's like, it's MP44 Optimus Prime. Because I pre-ordered a lot of stuff in the second half of the year. And a lot of it has been coming between like November and now.
Yeah.
In fact, one that was kind of a surprise because I wasn't expecting it until February was Kingdom Cyclonus. I gave him the little sword from the it was the third-party tailgate pack.
Yeah.
That came with the upgrade kit for the Classics or Universe Cyclonus, whatever it was. But specifically the purple one that came in the 2-pack with Rodimus, or Hot Rod.
Okay.
And I've you know, I showed off the Iron Factory Final Battle City Commander, which is really good. It's very chunky. It's not super big, but it's chunky. And it came with a little Minimus Ambus.
Does he actually fit inside there, or is he?
He does. Yeah, you can fold him up. My camera's not focusing for some reason, but I had a little trouble getting it in, and I'd rather have it out anyway. But it does fit in there. And then I've gotten all the Kingdom figures from my local shop, and I gotta say that Kingdom has been really, really good, but Beast Wars Megatron is just fantastic.
Yeah.
It's a really great figure. It's big and imposing, and it is the plastic for the skin is a little weird. It doesn't really lock in as firmly as I would like it to in theory, but it's not bad. There's a lot of articulation in the dinosaur mode that's allowed because of that. So I'm kind of going to let that slide.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got stacks of other stuff, just random stuff that I've picked up. There's a store that opened a couple years ago near me that sells a lot of older toys, just used stuff. And I found the little Obi-Wan Kenobi transformer that turns into the Jedi Starfighter. And this is such a fun little toy. I mean, the proportions are terrible. It's not the greatest robot, but it has lightsabers. And it actually turns into a pretty good little Jedi fighter. It was like $10. So how could I turn that down?
How to explain that to kids?
It's like, why is it transform?
There's a Millennium Falcon that splits into Han Solo and Chewbacca, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, there is. And I almost got, and I kind of regret not getting the, it's from like 2 years ago, there was the Darth Vader TIE Fighter. Because there was the older line, but then they did a couple more recent ones. And there was a Darth Vader figure that turned into a TIE Fighter. And it wasn't great. Like none of the human, Transformers that turn into people, the Marvel ones and the Star Wars ones, none of them are great, but they're fun and goofy, and really that's all that I want out of a robot these days. So I regret not picking that one up. I did get he's across the room, or I'd grab it, the Gigawatt Back to the Future crossover figure.
Oh yeah.
Which is really good. It's got a ton of detail, and it's basically the Earthrise or the Siege Sideswipe mold with just a couple of changes. So it's a really good, smooth, fun transformation, and the car mode is fantastic, and the robot mode's pretty good as well. They did a lot of good details.
I would think that would have to be, because, again, it's the Sideswipe mode, which, with him and Wheeljack, and how kind of generic, how sort of well done but generic they are, because they kind of have to be.
Well, that
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, considering like how bland the colors are when they're transformed, or at least that's how it looks in a lot of photos. Do you find that to be the case? That the color scheme is kind of bland?
The color scheme on Gigawatt in particular, or?
Yeah, or like Gigawatt and Ecto 1.
Yeah, Ecto 1 is one that's a lot better in car mode. I mean, it's mostly white anyway.
Yeah.
And it's really, really well detailed in car mode. And the robot mode is just kind of, the new one has a much better looking color scheme than the original one. Not enough to justify getting it a second time for me. I thought Gigawatt looked a lot better, in part because the colors, even though they're kind of flat colors, it's gray and black for the most part, it's still more exciting than the white and brown of Ectotron. And it's got a lot of little details that help make it pop a little more. Some of the details on the goggles, the blue, make the head pop a little more. And the front chest has the what's it called? The MacGuffin time machine thing from Back to the Future. The flux capacitor.
Oh,
yeah, it's got the flux capacitor picked out in blue, and then it's got the screen with all the different time periods from the interior of the DeLorean on the bottom of his chest in nice bright colors. And that really helps to make the figure pop a bit more
Hmm. That's good.
I'm pretty happy with it. And it looks like I think GameStop had the pre-order up for the same price as just a regular deluxe. So it looks like it's a bit more affordable than Ectotron was. But it's a good figure.
I'm going to keep watching Hasbro's to see if they reoffer Tap. I think was it Spin Out? And who's the other
Yeah,
one?
Spin Out and the other one, the one that got a mask.
The other one.
They've actually got that at the local toy store I was talking about, Tashi Station,
Hmm.
has all of um, the exclusive packs in stock. So if you have any trouble, it's at a bit of a markup over Hasbro, but not by a ridiculous amount.
Hmm.
So if you're interested, I could probably Corden, Spin Out and
So
Corden.
that
Nice.
is, you can see it. That is Bumblebee holding on to an RWC Jesse action figure, which
Who's
I'll post later.
it looks like he himself is holding on to an action figure.
He's holding on to an action figure, and there's also a guitar accessory.
That's the
Yeah.
other news for me this week is I got a
So you got a new bass amp.
yeah.
So tell me about that, because
Well,
I also play bass. If you guys didn't know.
I for years and years and years I played the same rig, which was a PV-115 cab, like an old 80s one that was made of lead and bricks,
Right.
and Carvin bass head. And the Carvin was super, super clean and not terribly interesting sounding, but it was big and loud and it worked. So that was fine. And I sold both of those a few years back. I got a little 210 Hartke cab because I'm getting older and, moving stuff up and down the stairs is hard. So it's lightweight. It sounds okay. And I picked up a little Ampeg bass head, like a 300 watt bass head that I had for about 6 months. And then it just broke spontaneously, which was a
Oh
shame,
man. Oh
but
man.
I expected it
Yeah.
to sound better than it did. It was not a bad amp,
Yeah.
but it wasn't a really good sounding amp. It was just kind of loud. So I've been thinking about replacing that for a while, and I just happened to look online and saw these little TC Electronic bass heads. And TC Electronic's a company that's been around for a long time, and they make really good sounding stuff. I've got one of their reverb pedals that's excellent sounding, and I thought, yeah, maybe this would be something to get at some point down the road. And I happened to look on Amazon, which has the 200-watt version of their little rack mount head for under $200. So it's like, yeah, it's a good price. I saw on a whim, I went ahead and spent the money on it. And it sounds great. I just wanted an amp. I just wanted something that I could play because I've got a little Line 6 combo that's good, but
Right.
it's the size of a lunchbox. So it's not going to sound really full for a bass amp. It's nice for practicing. It's nice, like if I just want to go over to somebody's place and play, I can just like pick that
Hmm.
up in one hand, the bass in the other. But the TC Electronic sounded really, really good. It's got a really good onboard compressor that does what it's supposed to do, but is really unobtrusive. It doesn't do the weird. It's a one knob set and forget thing. You don't
Right.
have to fiddle with it. It doesn't do that weird thing that compressors do if you set it wrong, where it'll grab onto the note too soon or too late. It doesn't make that popping sound. It doesn't warble when you're letting notes kind of die out. it's really good. I mean, I pretty much got all the controls set at noon. I've got the gain up a little bit to give it just a tiny bit of grit that I can get
Right.
rid of if I just don't hit it as hard. And it's good. I'm really pleased with it. And it's a little tiny head. So I've got a tiny bass head, a really light bass amp, and I'm ready to get out and gig but I'm not actually going to get out and gig because obviously we're in the middle of a global pandemic right now and I don't have a band.
Right. Right. Well, you can do one of those things where you could perform as a one-man show. Because if life has taught me anything, everyone loves a one-man bass solo act.
I've got a
At least
drum
that's what I want
machine.
to believe.
I'll just
And
do
a
some.
drum machine.
There's that band Royal Blood that's just a bass player and a drummer.
Oh.
So I can just do some I actually saw them live a few years ago opening for Queens of the Stone Age around here. And they were pretty good. They were tight. I mean, it's two guys, so it's not hard to be a really tight band when it's you and a drummer.
Yeah.
But they put on a really good show. And I've seen Queens of the Stone Age twice now, and they're fantastic.
Mm-hmm. My sister's kid, you know, I don't want to be a completely overbearing as they get into rock and roll, but they're like, "Oh, have you ever heard of this band called Queens of the Stone Age?" And I like teleport into the house, you know, frothing at the mouth, and I'm like, "There's this band called Caius," you know. But I saw Queens of the Stone Age. I lucked out because I knew about the record, and I had friends who were into Caius pretty hard, and I was like, whatever. But they were their first album just came out, and they were playing at Empty Bottle in Chicago, and so we went. This was in 1998, so that was the first time that they came through as Queens of the Stone Age, and I got to see them. It was great. I think it was the first time, but it was early enough. And I don't know if I've seen them since. Um, but yeah, that's
They're a different band now
lucked
than
out.
they were.
Yeah, I mean different people, but it's always the
It's
same guy. It's
yeah,
always Josh
it's
Homme.
Josh Homme or whatever his name is, however his name is
Whatever.
pronounced. I
Yeah.
apologize, Josh, for mispronouncing your
Well,
name.
He's a subscriber to our Twitter feed, so he'll be really upset when this is
But
eventually shared.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's nobody in the band now who was in the band when their first album came out, except for him.
Yeah.
But the band that he has now is really good. And I think it's been pretty stable for the last like 3 or 4 albums that they've done.
Yeah, it's been the last album was really good. Like Clockwork was okay. And then I forgot was I don't know if Era Vulgaris was the one before that. That's the one I really liked. Um, sometimes it's hit and miss. I have a 1x10 SWR bass combo, and it's 80 watts. And I got a display model from the expensive snooty guitar store in town. I was just tired of going to Guitar Center, and like I always had this theory that Guitar Center has a switch, or someone's got a switch at a factory,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, okay, the good stuff. Okay, where's the stuff going to Guitar Center? Turn off the good stuff switch, and then you get sort of like the bass, the sort of not like the imitation brand, but within the same brand kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I had previously bought an amp from them, and I was going to go with the Galen Kruger, if you know that brand.
Yep.
It's very, very high end and bright sounding amp. But I was going to go with that, and then I decided to get this 1x15 crate, and
That's yeah, no one likes Crate. I
no
mean,
one likes crate.
if you're not a musician,
Mm-hmm.
Crate's terrible. I shouldn't say that
You're finding a
because
polite way to say that crate is terrible.
I grew up, everybody had a Crate because they were cheap. And
Right.
like some of them actually were pretty decent, but my God, their old guitar combos were terrible.
I think they had like kind of a brief renaissance where they were like changing the speakers up to Celestion speakers, and this is
Hmm.
all I wouldn't know like the difference, but I think they were just really trying to have like one last hurrah in the 90s to make themselves a serious,
Their
contender compared to Marshall.
their tube line was not bad. Um, the Blue Voodoos,
So I
those
had a
weren't
friend who
bad.
had a Blue Voodoo. Yeah, and that was a good amp. But he eventually went to the JCM 800.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, um,
To put it in
but
perspective,
yeah,
like,
it had casters on it.
yeah, the other cheap, like super cheap guitar amplifier line, PV, which they're
PV, yeah,
inexpensive, but they actually
mhm.
sound good.
Yeah.
And
There's some effort.
I had a friend who had, and probably still has, a PV Bandit 65, which is just a little basic 65-watt combo. It was in the 80s combo. You could still go buy a PV Bandit today, whatever they've stepped up to. I used to have a Bandit 112. But that Bandit 65, it's the same amp that was used by the guitarist on the first Marilyn Manson album,
Okay.
because it's a freaking monster. It has a
Yeah.
Scorpion speaker in it. And that thing, like the other guitarist in the band that I was in high school, had a 100-watt 212 crate, and it could not compete with that PV. The PV just ate it alive.
I bet.
And another friend who had a valve state half stack. So he had the 100-watt Marshall valve state head and the 412 combo, and it could not keep up with the PV. The PV was stupidly loud and stupidly big sounding for a little 112 combo. I just
Yeah.
wanted to share that to, hey, PV, if you need an amp, go get a PV. They're cheap.
Well, my first band that played shows and recorded, our guitar player had a PV Butcher.
Mm,
If you've ever seen one of those,
yeah.
and I think that was PV's attempt to kind of emulate or compete with JCM 800. And I bought it from him, and then I held on to it, and I let people who were I jam with jam on it in case they didn't want to schlub things around. And no one ever said that they wanted it to keep it or use it for shows, and that's such is life, right? But like that's why I had it. It was just something to work on. But it was enough. But it was it was heavier than other amps, like in cabinets. It was like on the heaviest wood. It was just this giant blocky thing that you needed two hands to carry. At least I did. It was massive. But prior to that, like for basses, I would use I had a Fender Bassman 100-watt head in a 1x15 or a 1x18 cab. It wasn't a combo. And then that started to short out, and then I had the opportunity. Somebody had an acoustic uh, head and cab that he sold me. He wanted to get rid of it, and he gave me a deal. But it was so old; it had like a area code for a far off burb that was still Chicago's area code. It was so strange, and it was unwieldy. It was like between 0 and 1, the volume was intense, and it would shake the walls. And the bands that I used it for, they were like, "This is terrible," because you have all junk. You have just junk equipment.
Yeah.
But it was loud, and of course you drag it somewhere, and then when you're playing, this is something you learn when you're doing shows at small clubs, is you take it somewhere, and like two things happen. One, they get a line in from the sound guy, and two, they say turn the amp down all the way if it's going to go into the amp.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can never hear it straight from the amp. So you just drag it around this cab for no reason. And then when you're recording in the studio, the same thing. They just want line in for bass, and they handle the EQ during or after. So I recorded our first album on the first Hired Goons album we made through with the SRW with my bass player, with our drummer's SRW. She also played bass, and I didn't drag the crate in, even though I brought it, because the crate was fine for for touring, for doing shows. But like the wood got too cheap, was too cheap, and the casters broke.
Hmm.
That sucked. You know, so everything about it, and it had a line out. You know, it had a XLR output, and so does the SRW bass amp that I have. And so you know, it's tiny, it's loud, and it has a line out.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, perfect. You know, and I don't ever have to worry about being drowned out in practice at like reasonable volumes.
Hmm.
No one's trying to out, you know, to do each other when you're just trying to do stuff. So there you go. I don't know though if I'll, you know, because when I see that how you got kind of a small module and it works with a bigger cab, I don't know if that's something I'm going to do anytime soon because there's so much other stuff that I want to get right now. I've been buying art supplies, and no new art supplies is going to change my drawing style, but it's nice to have rulers that help me center things as opposed to being 1 through 12 inches. It's 6 to 0 and then 0 to 6 inches. So it helps me center and helps me plan. Just dumb things like that I could probably do by myself with elbow grease. But I'm trying to use that stimulus to stimulate the economy and what have you.
Well, you know,
Getting some extra pens.
and that's the thing is when you get new stuff, it motivates you to use it. I mean,
That's true. Yeah. Um, so not that anyone ever says, Paul, do you use rulers? Question mark. But you know, now I have more things to do and to kind of hold on to for the case. One thing about art styles, and I learned is hoard. You know, not just like for toys, and not like some people that we know who get multiple copies of figures, and you wonder why. But for example, I use a mechanical pencil, and I use non-repro or non-photo blue leads in them. You don't know what that means? That means you draw it in blue, and then when you ink over it, or someone else inks over it, when you scan it, it doesn't really show up. Sometimes it does. It takes a little bit of Photoshop. But the leads that I used for it, when I would go to legit art store and not like Amazon or wherever, they ran out of them. And it was like a big art store, but it's like no one must be using this, you know. And I was like, oh, if I put in an order for it, how long, you know, having worked retail, what if it takes 2 weeks because they're not the giant Amazon warehouse? So I did a little bit of searching and I found, you know, a stack of them. And I'm like, well, it's, you know, this much, but 6 for this much. I'm going to spend the extra money and have what might be like year's supply of this particular lead for this specific pencil size. And then the same thing with my inking pen. I use, for anyone who cares, it's called Prismacolor. And a lot of our artist pals use something called Pigma Micron, which is what these guys look like. You can see, I'll put it right here maybe. Um, kind of the beige pens, and I have these called Prismacolor. And I would go, and these are the zero, it shows up 0, 3, focus. Well, if it's not focusing, I apologize, but it's the width is 0, 3. And they just didn't have them. It's a basic pen, and it's a basic pen size. But I would go there and be like, hey, it's, you know, each pen is $3.50, but if you buy 6 of them, they're $3. And it's like, man, I'm gonna get 6 of these so that I never run out, you know, or because it's easy for me. I do this where I put tape on the pen that I break if it splits or if it's drying up, and I still want to kind of eke out the last bit of ink and coloring the tires that you see here or something like that, or filling the gap, or just finishing just a part of a line. Um, this way I'm not using it to do the actual work, and I can throw it out soon. I know which one to throw it out when I make a mess, because I have a mess on my desk. So that's something I learned as you hoard art supplies of stuff you're going to use. Um, there's a thing called Zipatone, or dual shade that duo shade that people use and used to use through the 90s until you would do stuff in Photoshop. How you kind of add like an extra layer of like, I say, grayscale art shading, and most people, you know, used it after inking. And you can't really find that stuff. A lot of people just don't, you know, by now it's obsolete. But if you're really into the, you know, doing it old school, that's something that you definitely want to get a hold of. I'm thinking about finding it, but at the same time, it's like, you know, there's a layer for that in Photoshop. So, and I'm already sloppy enough. So there you go.
It's been interesting, like seeing the changeover that people are doing between doing comics, you know, just pencil work and then inking work and then coloring work. And it's pretty
Right.
much all switched over to digital now.
I don't think you can color a comic um, the way they used to, and unless you're doing watercolors, you know, or you're the full-on artist, and that's your responsibility. You know, if you're Alex Ross, I don't know. I don't know if we're going to find out that Alex Ross paints things digitally.
Alex Ross just gets his people to come in and model it, and then he just like
Right.
does some Instagram filters on it, and he's done.
Right. I don't know if that's what happens. Um, I know. I mean, if we're fans. I don't know if you liked the GI Joe versus Transformers comic by Tom Scioli.
If you're asking me and not the
Yeah.
crowd, I adored that comic. And yeah,
Okay.
he's a guy who does real physical non-digital artwork.
But he also does it on Photoshop. There are
Yeah.
layers that he has specifically for that. And this is a book that I picked up recently, and it's the Jack Kirby uh, bio that he did.
Hmm.
And you know, if we're gonna say that, man, I don't know. I don't know if he does it digitally. I don't know if he does it by hand.
That
You're
looks
remarkable. I mean, I
more,
think he's a remarkable. He's an
yeah,
amazing artist, and
he is. And that does look more even and look a little more digital.
mhm.
Just in terms of the smoothness of the colors.
I'm going to show another book that, if you can see it, this is my friend Jim Terry did this book. And besides him being a local pal of mine, he is just an incredible artist. He's also an old school. He's all pen and ink. And this is his autobiography about growing up on outside of reservations and growing up in the 70s and around substance abuse and what have you. And it's pretty amazing. But he's absolutely not somebody. I don't ever see him going on Photoshop anytime soon, or Illustrator or any other program. But I know there's people that we know who are both, and I don't know what pages count as income for people anymore. It used to be how a lot of them came up with their income selling pages after the fact. And I remember reading from Scott McCloud when he did Reinventing Comics, the sequel to Understanding Comics. He was like, the first thing he realized was how much money he lost doing that book digitally. Because he made all of his money, he made a good chunk of money selling the pages to Understanding Comics and other books, but he did Reinventing Comics digitally. So, it's something that people probably have to weigh. I mean, and maybe there's not as much of a market anymore for physical comic pages from people, but I see people that we know and enjoy who probably do both at this point. It might just be easier to fix after the fact, and I haven't been able to do it. I don't want to say I might do it, as I really like drawing by hand. For anybody who is a fan of this kind of artwork, which I hope you all are, and I have a book available, so you should buy it. There you go. Anything else?
Have you watched any of the Netflix Transformers at all?
No. I
Okay.
think we talked about this last time. I was
Yeah.
still.
Yeah. It's certainly a thing that exists.
It's a thing that exists. It's like probably the nicest thing ever.
There's a lot of it that I kind of sort of like. I know that there's been a lot of criticism of the voice work, and I feel like
Mhm.
some of it's got to be the voice direction. Um, I actually took somebody's advice and played a few episodes of Earthrise on like 1.25 speed.
Yeah,
It was a better show.
I'm sure.
It went faster, and the animation was actually a little smoother. So I highly recommend that. Um, I am looking forward to the next one. You know, I like a lot of the people who did the voices on it. You know,
Mhm.
I think the guy, the young man who's doing Optimus Prime, I think he's fine. I kind of wish he'd do a little bit less of a Peter Cullen impression and let his own voice kind of shine, because I think he's a better voice actor than that show would have you believe. And Jason Marnocha or Marno, I hate trying to say their names because I know I'm mispronouncing his name. The guy
Yeah.
who does Megatron, Jason Marnocha, is really good. You know, he was one of the highlights of the terrible Machinima series. And he's much flatter sounding here. But I think that comes down to what they're trying to do with the show and less him. And I think that goes for
Right.
the entirety of the voice cast. Um, I'm looking forward to Kingdom just because it's going to be the first time seeing any of the Beast Wars cast on screen
Yeah.
in years and years. And I am a bit concerned because I don't know who's been cast to do any of the voices for them, for the Beast Wars characters. And having it not be the original cast is going to be a little jarring.
Yeah.
Because obviously we've had multiple reboots of the G1 series. So like hearing somebody who's not Frank Welker play Megatron or Peter Cullen play Prime, it's like, okay, that's fine.
Would you call animated a reboot of the G1 series?
Yeah, I think so. I think
I mean,
it's rooted in that.
there's a lot of stuff that's it's always going to end up with sort of the same concepts and ending in the same place a lot of times.
Well, compared to like uh Robots in Disguise, like the first
Mhm.
one, the Car Robot Show, or the Unicron trilogy, I feel like
Right.
animated was closer in spirit to G1 than those were.
Yeah.
It was definitely going for the more stylized look, but a more G1 look, and the
Mhm.
personalities were more rooted in the original cartoon.
And they definitely had personality compared to those other
And I loved
um,
animated Optimus Prime. I think there's
yeah.
been that movement away from the kind of like more fun-loving Optimus Prime that you'd see in the G1 cartoon, where he'd play
Mhm.
basketball or crack jokes. And now it's
See,
just,
this is blasphemy. You're going into blasphemy right now, man.
I'm still disappointed that the MP44 didn't come with a basketball. Um, and the animated version, it was a younger Optimus Prime, but he was more, he'd joke around. He was still like a leader figure, and but he was more like the big brother instead of the dad, or where
Yeah.
we are now, the wizened elder.
Right. I'm tired of Weisendelder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let Peter Cullen have some fun. Let him play
I just don't think
basketball again.
I just don't think that that's one of the things that they really want to afford is paying him,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
keep going. But they also don't want to take a step to make it slightly different.
yeah,
And that's always going to be kind of a bummer. But then, it's just kind of the disappointment of just going to keep retelling certain stories or certain concepts always have to hang in the background. Um, but you also don't have to watch it. And I think I said one time, I just after the first episode of the last, at the beginning of this series, I was like, this is just not for me. I just don't have the patience for this, and I just, you know, I'm just not interested. And I have dumb documentaries to watch, and dumb '40s crime movies to watch.
There's
And
better
actually, before
stuff.
we got in the call, yeah, there's always something. And the stuff I like is not anyone's cup of tea all the time either. So, you know, before we got on the call, I was watching the Night Stalker series on Netflix. So I don't know if you've seen that or not.
No.
It's a documentary about the Night Stalker in California. It's about murders. So I'm watching it. Maybe if the Transformers series narrated by Prime as he tries to solve famous crimes.
No, that's just Unsolved Mysteries.
Same.
It's like it's narrated by Ultra Magnus.
There you go.
No,
I don't know if it was
go ahead.
John, what's his name, John, who ended up doing Optimus Prime in the Bumblebee movie. But he had been doing an Optimus Prime parody, the
John Bailey.
Honest Trailer's voice.
Yeah.
John Bailey. But he may have, I don't know if they did an Optimus. Someone did a Unsolved Mysteries with Ultra Magnus as the narrator. And it was pretty crude, language-wise, I think. I don't know if John Bailey was involved in that, but that's something, that's where he was starting. He was doing those parodies with people who were just making their own animation at the time.
And
so
he,
funny that you mentioned that.
When the whole Bumblebee movie thing with him was kind of funny because they'd originally brought him in, and if you listen to the first trailers, it's him doing the voice of Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
And I guess Peter Cullen made a push to get in to do it, so they brought him in basically just to dub over John Bailey. But then they didn't get Frank Welker or Corey Burton to do Shockwave or Soundwave. They just had John Bailey do those voices. Because I think John
Bailey does. Yeah.
I don't even know if they could have gotten Corey Burton, because he said that he doesn't want to have anything to do with any of the big budget Transformers movies. That it's just not interesting to him at all.
It's a paycheck, right?
Well, if it was Bill Murray, then he'd do it. I think, they talked about, he was on Conan or something like that, and they asked him about, it's like, you did those Garfield movies. He's like, yeah. It's like, and you did the second one. It was really bad. Yeah. I wanted to buy a new suit or something like that.
Well, why he did the original was because he thought that the Coen who was directing the movie was one of the Coen brothers, just with a different spelling. He didn't know which Coen, it wasn't. It was somebody else, and that's why he answered the call.
Mm-hmm. It's like, by then it's like I'm in too deep, and they've offered me too much money. Right. With the upside of that is we get it completes the circle of Lorenzo Music.
That's right. Yeah.
Doing each other's voices. I guess we should explain that.
I'll tell you, like when I was a kid, Real Ghostbusters was such a great show.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed so above like Saturday morning stuff, and it seemed so above, like, especially when you sort of realize that these commercials or these cartoons are commercials, that it also seemed beyond that,
If you look at the people who were writing for it.
Oh yeah, J. Michael Straczynski.
Yeah.
So he was like the showrunner, I think, if I'm not mistaken, or one of the head writers. But then after, because they had that, it's really weird to see how that went. They had that sort of like, you had the Saturday morning version on ABC, and then certain markets had episodes that were like syndicated that ran every day after school. and the animation wasn't as good, but the stories were like a little darker. They can get away with more. It wasn't Saturday morning, and then the next year, Lorenzo Music was gone, and it was Dave Coulier from what's that?
House.
What's it? Full House. You know, and for me, I was like, oh, turn it off. I'm never watching this again. I just couldn't take it. I was so used to Lorenzo Music's voice. It was perfect.
And for the people out there who aren't 40,
Yeah.
Lorenzo Music did the voice of Garfield in the 80s Garfield cartoon. And he also did the voice of Peter Venkman in the Ghostbusters cartoon. And so obviously, you know, Bill Murray was Peter Venkman in the Ghostbusters movies. And then he also did the voice of Garfield in the Garfield movies. So that is the circle of Lorenzo Music and Bill Murray doing voices for everybody who's not in their 40s.
Everybody who is not worried about the retirement right now.
You know, that was something I was making jokes about when Garth Brooks played the inauguration, when he sang, which he admittedly did a really excellent job. I was making jokes about Chris Gaines.
Chris Gaines.
Nobody who's under 40 knows
Jesse.
what the whole Chris Gaines thing is about.
No one's going to respond to that.
And I feel like I was putting out these awesome Chris Gaines jokes, and nobody appreciated that. And to explain that, in either 1999 or 2000, it was right around that period because I was working in a music store at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Garth Brooks put out a rock album under the pseudonym Chris Gaines. And the whole background of it was that Chris Gaines was this Australian singer, and he did interviews with this bad fake Australian accent. You know, that was the vehicle for him to be able to do this rock album. And I cannot speak to the quality of that album because, you know, I listened to it and we played it in the store, and it was not terribly memorable. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great, and it bombed. Nobody bought it. There's probably like a landfill filled with Chris Gaines CDs somewhere out there.
Probably, yeah.
We got so many of those damn things. We had so many Chris Gaines CDs. We had them up on the end caps for months and months on end, and then we had to take almost every single one of them and put them back in the box and ship them back to corporate because nobody bought it.
Was this?
It was Specs Music. That was part of the Camelot family of it's what FYE came from. It was right around the time I started working for them. I think FYE was like the corporate side of it, and they had bought all of these record stores like Camelot and Coconuts or something like that.
Okay, what year? Oh, I remember Coconuts. What year was this?
This was in 99. I worked there for about a year and a half, 99, 2000. And this is in Tallahassee, Florida. And the one that I worked at, we had a pretty good manager. Corporate started like really cracking down on a lot of, you know, the practices there. They wanted more uniformity in terms of how the store presented itself nationwide. So they started cracking down the dress code. They started cracking down the music we could play. Because when I started working there, you could wear whatever you wanted. You had a little like name tag thing that showed that you worked there. We played whatever we wanted on whatever music we wanted in store. And then they started mandating that we wear uniforms. They started sending us the most god-awful mix CDs with like people DJing in between tracks. Like, oh, that was blah 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 blah, and it was just awful. And one of the things we got was a very popular song at the time was from an artist known as Juvenile, and the song was called "Back That Ass Up." You happen to recall? We got a version of it that he recorded two versions. There was the regular version that had profanity and crude language, and then he recorded a clean version for radio use that was "Back That Thing Up." that was still a little bit crude, but it was good enough for radio play in the late 90s. Well, that wasn't good enough for your entertainment corporate. So they sent us the extra clean version of Back That Thing Up, which was the original version with every bit of profanity or crude language edited.
Yeah.
To the point that there was barely any rapping in the song. Like 3/4 of the words were just entirely cut out. And it was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And we got a new manager in who was a pain in the ass. And he said, if you don't like me, don't give me 2 weeks, just quit. And everyone quit within about a week. And I went to go work at the organic food co-op next door as a cashier. So, yeah, that's my little rant there. That's my work.
I worked in a record store briefly. That's a complete work history. You're currently unemployed.
What was that?
I said that's your complete work history.
Yeah, that's my complete. I worked for Specs Music and New Leaf Market, and that's it. I robbed banks.
I worked at a record store. Yeah, I worked at a music store that was down the street from this baseball card store. And I think 99% of the reason why I got hired was because the manager was trying to go out with me, but I wasn't gay. You know, he seemed like a nice guy, but he was also kind of weird. He left gay porn around all the time as people were perusing the store. And then like no one ever came to the store, so he had to let me go. And I was like, of course, I was not a good employee. I was just like, dude, look at this record, look at this record. That was just my whole life.
Yeah.
You know, I was just looking at records to kind of sample and probably driving people out with my knowledge of Nuclear Blast and Metal Blade records and Earache records.
I mean, that's why I wanted to work in a music store, was just to get the discount so I could
buy CDs. Yeah, because you're spending all your money.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, the memories. Yeah, that didn't last very long.
I took a lot more of my paycheck home at the organic food store.
Yeah, who's gonna eat organic food?
I mean, well, it was so expensive. I mean, even more so than that. I mean, this was in like 2000. So
it probably wasn't like a thing you could do in mass to have a cheaper cost per unit, probably.
Well, and it's also before people realized how to like make good vegetarian food.
Yeah.
And it all tasted terrible.
How many copies of the Flame Toys RC are you gonna order? And do they come with
oh God, they are making an RC, aren't they?
Yeah, she's got like a couple bikini lines. And a belly button. I don't know if you saw that.
It's a real shame that Hasbro is doing such a terrible job with RC lately. Like the best of the figures is the one that came out in Earthrise, and it still has a massive backpack.
Yeah, I don't say I was gonna have a total problem with that, but because I have the Thrilling 35, I just didn't see a reason for myself.
Yeah.
Was it 35 or Thrilling 30?
30. Thrilling
I didn't see a reason to pick her up.
I have ended up with 2 versions of that mold, neither of which are RC. I got the Paradon Medic 2-pack because I wanted Ratchet. Yeah. So I got, what's her name? Flatline? Not Flatline. Something, I don't know. The teal one, which is really good. It's a really good looking figure. That color is very striking. And I did manage to get Alita 1, which is also a very striking figure. And both of them look better than RC because that pink and white is just not great. But it's a decent figure. Transformation is an absolute nightmare. At least for me, I just cannot get it to go most of the time. But it's not bad. I do think the Thrilling 30 version's better.
I think, and then now that you say that, I might see if I can find the Alita 1 for this one, because I didn't pick up Alita 1 for Titan's Return.
Yeah, I did.
Because I didn't want to get a a larger figure.
Yeah. I did get it, and the one I got was broken out of the box. So I took it
Oh,
back, and I never saw it in the wild again. And I didn't really like it that much anyway, because
yeah.
I hate stickers on figures. I'd much rather have tampagraphs, and the stickers on the Power of the Primes figures were just awful.
I had a fun time putting stickers on Whirl,
Yeah.
for Thrilling 30. That took me back a little bit, but I don't know. I
The,
haven't bought any of the larger figures.
the quality of those stickers were a lot better too than what came
Yeah.
with Power of the Primes.
But I don't think I've bought many Power of the Primes figures except for maybe I don't know if Swoop was Power of the Primes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the Dinobots were.
But but I was so tired of just buying combiner figures. I just didn't like them that much, except for Alpha Bravo, who is like the greatest Autobot of all
the
time.
best Autobot. It's
Yeah.
yeah, like at the time I was just getting back into Transformers figures, and Combiner Wars and Titans Return was really exciting. And looking back on it
Mhm.
now, the Siege and Earthrise lines have been so good that looking back on the Titans Return figures, it's like these were not as good as I thought they were. One other thing I did pick up is I got the MMC reformatted Jaguar. That's the More Than Meets the Eye Ravage that turns into something that sort of looks like Beast Wars Ravage.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Okay.
kind of I kind of wanted the accessories because I've been really pleased with their Tyrantron, their More Than Meets the Eye Megatron, and it came with a bunch of accessories to that. But like Ravage is pretty good. He even has the most important accessory that you can have for More Than Meets the Eye Ravage. He comes in half.
Uh,
Terrible. I'm still waiting for them to come out with an Ambulon.
yeah.
Just splits right
Now
down.
we've been at this for an hour. Is there anything that we want to move on
No,
to, or
no. It's like there's all this Transformers
yeah,
media that's coming out, and there's just nothing terribly exciting. I think the comics are
yeah.
fine. They're not at the
Mhm.
level that they were when the prior IDW stuff was at its height, but they're fine.
Right.
But there's nothing like terribly exciting to talk about there.
Yeah.
The cartoon is fine to not very fine, so that's not very exciting. I've been watching
And
WandaVision.
again, too. No, I
WandaVision's
haven't watched
good.
WandaVision.
Yeah, so I don't want to say anything about that.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
I'll tell you
So,
what I'm catching up on is I got Hulu Plus
mm,
for $2 a month when they were offering it that way, and I caught up on regular show, which is a misnomer. It's not regular, but it was great. And I am taking my time with Venture Brothers because I'm hoping that by the time I finish watching the last season, that they announce that is in fact not the last season of Venture
yeah,
Brothers.
they really just need like one more, I think,
Just
to wrap
something.
up.
I
I'm
mean,
hope.
it's grateful that they've gone on so long, but they I imagine that when they put the show together, they have to see the writing on the wall every time they make a season. I think
Yeah,
this could be it.
I'm waiting until March to pick up. I'll finally go ahead and get HBO Plus to catch up on a lot of DC comic shows from the past few
Hmm.
years, and March, of course, for Godzilla versus Kong, which is the only movie coming out this year that I care about at all. I don't care about any other movie coming out. I just want to watch two big monsters wail on
Yeah.
each other. That is the height of cinema.
There's a movie coming out at the end of the week that we're talking with Denzel Washington.
Okay.
I think it's called The Little Things. Like I could be wrong.
What's it about?
It's just a crime story. It's
Oh,
just a
okay.
detective serial killer story. So I'll have to
That's
double check. It looks like it's going to be really good, or it looks like it's going to be really over dramatic and terrible.
Well, that's the sort of thing that's kind of right up his alley, because he's done a lot
Yeah.
of good crime thrillers. All right. Well, I should go rob some more banks to buy more
I
transfer.
don't know if you hear the high pitched whine.
I'm hearing all sorts of high-pitched whines here.
Okay. All right, it's your place or at my place?
At my place.
Okay, because I have
Between the kids and the people playing, between the kids, my wife playing violin, and the fact that I live in a 70-year-old house, I hear all sorts of weird noises.
I have my radiator is about to go insane here, so I think we should wrap that up.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, everybody.
Yeah. So we're gonna. This is our test because I want to see if we can put this on the YouTubes.
Yep.
So I'll talk to you about that later about processing it and getting. I think you can send me a link.
Yeah.
But we want to test this out, and the next time I'll make sure that when I try this again, I'll have this set up properly. Because I just want to do, I want to say we're not doing. We're busy, right? You can only take so many calls from me at the middle of the night saying, "Do you know that there's like 10 more things about Skyrim you didn't know?" And it turns out Jesse's not really fond of that at 3 in the morning. But 4 in the morning because you're an hour ahead. See, it's okay.
Right.
But the .com, I got something. I'm grateful that we're able to kind of put stuff out there a lot. .com's got something new every weekday through the end of February at least. So keep going there. robotswithcoffee.com, and then keep hitting us up at Facebook and Twitter. And when we'll do, we'll let you know obviously how we do this again, right?
Yep.
All right.
All right.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Yep.